4 years ago, the public decided that it's a good idea to leave the European Union. The process has been long and messy, and now Boris Johnson is telling us that we should prepare for a no-deal Brexit. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think this is going to impact us? And do you think we're going to be able to survive it, especially with our other regulations happening as well?
I think it's first of all important to talk about what it means to be leaving with no deal, because I think there's so much political jargon going on. We know that we're leaving the European Union, we hear no deal, and it's like, what does that mean? And it's basically that the UK trades heavily with the EU. So it's something like we export 43% of our produce or resources or whatever to the European Union, and we import 51% of our goods and resources from them. And we've been able to import and export for free because we're part of the Union. And we've also not had to check anything on the borders because it's coming from the EU and we're in this treaty together. When we break out of the European Union, if we leave with no deal, it means that we haven't agreed any terms in regards to tax and tariffs, in terms of exporting and importing into the European Union, meaning that we're going to have to trade according to the World Trade Organization, which means that it could be how much tax on top of things. So it means that things are going to be backed up on the borders, things that could travel into the country before and now having to get checked, and it could have a backlog. My point is, this is going to affect us, especially in the short term. With the pandemic going on, we have not had the time as a country to focus on getting a deal sorted and making sure that there was a smooth transition. We were supposed to have this whole year for a transition, and it hasn't happened. And apparently Boris Johnson is telling people pharmacists and pharmaceutical companies to stock up on medication for 6 weeks in preparation. Sainsbury's, Tesco's, all the supermarkets are trying to stock up on food, but they're just like, there are some things that we're just not going to get, and people need to be prepared. 30% of our produce, fruit and veg, comes from Europe. It's not going to be coming in. They're saying there's not going to be as much choice, and we're going to have to put the prices up on things in order to account for the fact if tax goes up on these goods. It honestly, it makes me so sad.
It's just honestly, it's just horrible. Like, I just hate it all. One, I don't think it should have taken us this long to get to a point of still negotiating a deal, but we don't have any kind of deal on the table, and now we're about to. Like, it's just far-fetched to even say that this was decided 4 years ago, and 4 years later, this is the position that we're in. That we're scrambling for a couple months, and we don't have anything. We don't even have a little bit of something. We don't even have a draft. We just have nothing. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? Like, do you know how much of a joke this country feels like we're running with a joke? Like, people can't even lead us. No, that's how much it infuriates me. It's an actual joke. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, it's just crazy, because the reality of the situation is it's going to impact us, the people that are like on the ground, more. And we are now also fighting a pandemic, and they're saying that the recession that's about to come is going to be 4 times worse than the recession that was in 2008, 2009. So on top of people not having money or not having jobs, again, then we're going to have less produce. Things are going to go up in price, but the cost of the living wage is not going to go up, but people are not going to have any money. You're not doing the furlough scheme anymore. You're only offering this job support scheme. It's only 22% of people's wage. Like, it just is ridiculous. And at the end of the day, us as a nation, as a population, we're going to end up paying for it. And I just think it's going to be scenes of chaos. I hope it is not, but I think it will be scenes of chaos.
Definitely.
Go off, Anissa. Go off.
I'm very
It's
upset.
true.
It's just silly.
So much.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
it's true. No, you're right. And there's been so many other layers to it, but I'll get into that in a second, because as soon as you said that, I thought of so many things. But one of the things that scares me is, so during the UK being in the European Union, if you are a medical professional working in the UK, but your nationality is from the EU and not from England, we have this deal that your medical qualifications are able to be recognised. And with the withdrawal agreement, they were urging that all the qualifications that were recognised before December 2020 should be recognised afterwards. With a no deal, that might affect workers' rights to enforce that the qualifications should be recognised. And for context, I think there is like 67,000 NHS workers that have a nationality within the EU. So that's how many NHS workers that could affect. And if you're someone that works here and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, sorry, and I see that you were a doctor in December, but it's now January. So do you know what I mean? So that might actually encourage a lot of people to relocate, and I wouldn't even be mad at them if they did. And of course, with the current pandemic, we can't have anything else except for consistent healthcare. Like we just had a whole discussion about how we haven't handled this well, and how too many of us are dying, and how we're all scared to go on to the next chapter because winter's coming and there's so many other things going on. We can't also then lose 67,000 medical professionals in this process. Like it's
and the NHS is so stretched already.
Yeah.
Listen.
And I think this is what makes me so upset about all of this, honestly, is that the reason why this was even brought about 4 years ago is because politicians capitalized on xenophobia, and they made leaving the EU about immigration. It made it about, we're going to get our British identity back. You know, we can stand alone. We can do this. We cannot. Let's just be very clear. We don't really grow enough in this country in order to be able to stand alone. And when we talk about being great and our national identity, let's be very clear. The reason why we were great is because we did colonization and we were able to have an empire over vast amounts of countries. It's just a fact. And I'm not even going to get into that. But that was the reason why we were great. That's why the reason we could stand alone. That was the reason why we had such a strong identity. And you are getting people to vote on this idea of leaving the EU because you're saying we need to get back. Get back to what? We're not going back to colonization. You're not going to have that again. So what exactly are you getting people to vote on? And now we're going to be left. And the thing is, the politicians know how much we need the EU. They knew it and they did it anyway. And it's the poorest people, as always, who are going to suffer. The people in the north, who I don't understand, voted for the Conservatives. And I'm like, when the prices goes up on food and drink and gas and electric, who does that hurt the most? And the politicians won't care then. Honestly, it just makes me so angry that this was really founded on an idea of racism. And it really shows the ideologies that really underpinned our government, and they stoked fear in people that they were going to get their country back. But now what they have to do is write deals with other countries because they're like, well, we don't grow enough here. We don't do enough to be able to stand alone. So we need to do a deal somewhere else, but we don't want to do it with the EU.
You see, I think Britain, there's so many thoughts that I picked up from Sophie. I really felt Sophie in my spirit just coming up.
Are you better than Anissa and then Sophie? I was like, I almost started doing gun fingers to the camera, but I had to hold myself back. I was like, you guys better go off.
You were like, go where? I was like, let's go. Where are we going? But it was more because you were right about the it being built on xenophobia and racism, but I just kind of find it like funny when Britain like picks up, it decides to pick and choose what the British identity really means.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that they're bringing out the new coin, the 50p coin, and it says that Britain's built on diversity. Oh, you guys haven't seen this? They're bringing out a new 50p coin.
That's just
and
upsetting.
the message on the coin is going to say that Britain's built on diversity, and Twitter was going off because they were like, no, it wasn't. It was built on slavery,
diversity
colonization
of the countries that you colonized.
But it was just like, I think this happened I think they announced it 2 or 3 days ago, so it's still pretty fresh. But the whole point is, it's so funny now that Britain is built on diversity. Okay, but this is the same thing that you weaponize to scare more people into doing X thing.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, when I knew this Brexit thing, I can't remember his name now because I don't know why, but 4 years
Nigel
ago.
Farage.
No, I'm talking about, who was the Prime Minister?
David
when
Cameron?
the first came in?
Yeah, David Cameron.
Okay.
Listen, after that vote came, and the next day, when my boy
gone.
left, I said, no, I'm done. You man, sort out yourself. I went, no, we're done.
No,
This is
okay,
it.
just to be clear, he didn't walk away. The party were like, you need to leave, because they're like, you have screwed the country. You need to resign. Like, it wasn't a choice.
But
it was like, you screwed us.
Like
you need to go.
Going.
No, it wasn't at all.
He said, if we vote to leave the EU, I'm resigning. That's what he said.
He had to. It was party pressure. It was party pressure.
He was making it seem like, he was like, you know what, I'm done, you lot. And that's
what he was trying to be like, I deeply oppose this decision and I'm off.
No,
Yeah, that's what I got.
You know what? Let
It's
me
not
not admit
that.
something. I was about to admit something. Let me not.
Move ahead.
Let's move ahead because you guys are going to look at me like this girl's an idiot. But something that I would. So the reason why I just went like Nigel Farage with my whole chest is because the campaigns that they use, as well as like it was partly the xenophobia, of course, but then also they said, look how much money we spend on the EU each year. And Anissa, you just said the NHS is stretched as it is, right? And they were like,
Absolutely
we can
stretched.
use this money
Boris
to
Johnson
save
Johnson
the
said that.
NHS.
Boris Johnson said that. He
More
was like,
than-
we
more
put
than
400
one
million
conservative
in.
Politicians
Yep.
said that, including Nigel Farage, who had a whole campaign bus with, like you said, the money on the side of it, saying we can put this into the NHS. Why don't we just leave the EU so we have all this extra spending money? And then went on national television to say, I never promised that, I could never promise that, and I never did. And then they played the clip.
The thing that upsets me about that is
Men
that
love to lie unprovoked.
we have a British press that can allow. Politics has gotten to a point where people can spin any sort of lie. They can mix truth with error. So they can say, we spend 400 million, that money could be going elsewhere, which is true. Saying it could go into the NHS, you know that's a lie. You know it's not a savings account. That's not what the EU is. You don't take it from there and put it into somewhere else. Because the thing is, when we first were looking to leave the deal, when what's her name? Theresa May had to start writing deals. The first thing she did was go over to India, go over to this country to do a new deal. And everybody wants the same thing. When you go over there, they said, we want better immigration. So we want to get into the country easier. So this whole idea of we don't want Eastern Europeans, but I'm just like, but when the Indians come, and we've just done a deal with Japan and the Japanese come, are you going to be any happier? Are you going to be happier?
And I'd like to point out they really don't care about the NHS, because in all this time have they given our junior doctors or our nurses a pay rise?
Yep.
No, but
That's a good point.
the politicians have got a pay rise.
But they
don't
got a
care
clap
about
though, Anissa, they got a clap. So that's a currency. That's a currency. They received that.
It's just upsetting because they don't care about the
man.
NHS because they all use private healthcare. Let's keep it real. They're not.
so true.
They're
Oh
not.
my
They
gosh,
use private
yes.
healthcare. And yes, Boris
Yes.
Johnson went to the NHS when he got sick. That was obviously a publicity stunt because in terms of not him having the him having the condition, but him going to the NHS because
public health service.
exactly. You were going to. You're not
true.
going to Borough of Newham, which has some of the highest rates of the pandemic. You're not doing that. You're going to some prestigious one in Westminster that has the best of the NHS has to offer.
Yeah.
And he couldn't, in all good faith, go and use private healthcare, and then the country is now having to use the NHS. And when he comes up with this whole thing, I don't know if you guys have heard about him saying, we're going to have the deal that Australia has. Australia has a deal like the World Trade Organization with the EU, and they're fine. And Australia doesn't rely on the EU. They're so far away.
Yeah.
They will pay the tariff and taxes because they're like, well, we don't depend on them for our imports or exports.
Yeah.
It's the same with Canada.
100%.
We don't depend, but we depend on the EU. So us having to pay higher rates, and there's going to be a backlog now because they're saying we don't even have the space. They're saying we don't have the space to store things at the border. Because before, we never had to store anything from the EU. It was from the EU. It went through straight away. But now they're saying they have to build storage units because they're like, in order to check things, it's going to take up X amount of time. And they're saying any deal that we even broker now is not actually going to help in the immediate future. Because these deals take years to write. So it's not going to be a quick fix. And they said a document got leaked from the government showing that there's going to be, a 2 to 8% economic problems, not downturn, but there's going to be a 2% lack of economic growth in the next 15 years after leaving the EU. So they're like, we know that it's not actually going to benefit us. We know that. But they don't want to tell people that.
In terms of trading, the thing is, like, the pro-leavers were all saying, it's going to help British businesses so much, and it's going to grow the economy. And what you just said about the EU, like the EU is like the single biggest trader that the UK has. And like you said earlier about the tariffs, like we don't have any when we're in the European Union, but when we leave the European Union, if we were to leave with a no deal, we have to automatically fall into WTO like trading rules and regulations. So if you wanted to be like, okay, so it's convenient to us to have the EU, like you said, it's next door to us, so it's not going to affect Canada and Australia the same way because they're not relying on us. If we need like an emergency supply of medical equipment, we're going to go to European countries because they're next door. If you wanted to like lower the tariff or something on the European Union countries, you actually couldn't do that without treating all the other countries in the world the exact same.
Exactly.
So like if you did that, if you lowered it to make things easier for everyone else, you would have to lower it for every single other country that wants to trade. So then if we have loads of cheap imports coming into the UK, then it actually does worse for British businesses.
Exactly.
So I'm like, how have none of the things that all the pro-leavers were raving for worked out? Like not a single one? Not a single one. Because even if you were proposing us to leave the European Union and you had good intentions, because I do believe that the campaign ran largely on xenophobia and on giving money to the NHS, but I do believe there are actually leavers who aren't trying to be like trying to do like a make England
Some
great
people
again.
say they don't like the courts of the EU and that we have to abide by their legal laws as well, just by being part of it. So you are right.
That's petrifying. That's petrifying to me because I don't need. I mean, it's a whole other topic. Let's not get into it. But that was one of the things that made me vote Remain. Actually,
I think it's so important what you're saying, and I think that the thing that makes me really upset about this is that they're saying that Boris Johnson hadn't even made up his mind about whether he was going to vote Leave or Remain until like a few days before the vote actually happened, because he was trying to work out which one would suit him best, which side that he would take. And when it goes belly up, mark my words, he's going to say, we're just giving the people what they voted for.
Right, but I'm just interested to know, like, how, okay, you know when you do something and it's scary and you calm yourself in your mind by being like, all right, worst case scenario, A, B, and C, right? So when you're campaigning so hard for... Brexit, how are you not also thinking about worst case scenario, which is leaving with no deal?
Do you know what? I can answer that one very quickly. No one saw this pandemic coming. And I would bet money that if the pandemic had happened and we were in the first wave in the middle of it before we left the EU, we would have been like, we're just going to put that on hold for the moment because we need to deal with the pandemic. Because they would have realised, now that this has happened, we realise that we can't do without their medication. We can't do without the trade. Now is not the time. But unfortunately, January 31st, we put into leave and we have to deal with the consequences now because we never thought that the country was going to go, as Anissa said, into a 4 times worse recession than it ever has been before. So you get what you pay for? We did the vote. We have to do the time as a country.
Yeah, I mean,
honey, I didn't vote for that time.
Well, neither did I, but it's democracy. It's democracy.
Now they got me on cell block D, trading noodles, so that's not what I wanted, honey.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many